My brother yelled at me in front of our mother. "You stole from us!" And I stayed silent. 10 years. 10 years taking care of it, keeping the family cafe alive, without a salary, without help, without recognition, and now they call me a thief. But what my brother didn't know was that I had proof. A spreadsheet detailing every penny I invested, and the day I showed it changed everything. Stay until the end, because this story will make you rethink what love, sacrifice, and justice really are.
The sun hadn't even touched the windows of the small Sweet Hope Cafe when Sofia was already up, setting the tables and turning on the coffee maker. The steam rose in thin spirals, mingling with the smell of fresh cake and overdue bills on the counter. The cafe was her mother Dona Elena's dream, but for years she, with her tired body and calloused hands, had been the one supporting it. Between batches, Sofia took a deep breath and wondered how much longer she could manage alone. The city slept, but the hum of the espresso machine was a constant reminder that routine was unforgiving. The cafe, once a community meeting point, now barely received any customers. The pandemic, her mother's illness, and debts caused the business to plummet. Even so, Sofia persisted, not out of vanity, but out of love. For her, each cup served was an act of resistance, a silent promise that her mother's legacy would not be forgotten. Dona Elena, once vibrant, now spent her days between her bedroom and the living room armchair. The sweet voice that once guided her recipes had become weak, sometimes lost in lapses of memory. Sofia tried to hide the difficulties, lying that everything was fine. She didn't want her mother to know that the cafe barely paid the bills, nor that the suppliers were already threatening to stop delivering supplies. That morning, the sound of the bells startled her from her thoughts. It was the delivery man, asking for payment for an old batch of flour. Sofia smiled awkwardly and asked, "Just one more week." The man nodded, but she knew the deadline had already been extended too many times. As soon as he left, Sofia rested her hands on the counter and let the tears fall silently. Only she and the coffee knew the price of persistence. At midday, business picked up a little. 3 regular customers arrived, praising the carrot cake. Sofia smiled, but inside she felt the weight of exhaustion. She cleaned the tables while thinking about the numbers. There was a huge deficit, and the money coming in barely covered the costs. Still, she didn't think about giving up. The cafe was the heart of the family, and she would be its last beat if necessary. That late afternoon, Sofia sat beside her mother, holding her hand. Dona Elena stroked her fingers and said, "You are stronger than I ever was." The words sounded like a blessing and a burden. Sofia smiled, but inside she felt broken. Strong, yes, but on the verge of collapse. As the sky darkened, she opened her notebook. The income and expenses columns didn't match, and the numbers danced before her tired eyes. She noted a new debt and erased an old one, trying to balance the impossible. "I'll deal with it tomorrow," she murmured, more to herself than to reality. The clock struck 10 at night. The empty cafe reflected its loneliness. She turned off the lights and looked around. Every detail told a story. The photos on the wall, the chipped cups, the counter stained with time. Everything there breathed memory, love, and weariness. She locked the door, hoping that tomorrow would bring some relief. That night, before going to sleep, he heard his mother coughing in the next room. He went there, carefully covered her, and whispered, "Everything will be all right, Mom." But deep down, Sofia knew something was about to change, and it wouldn't be easy. In the darkness, the distant sound of rain mingled with the echo of the silent cafe. Sweet Hope slept, and with it, the woman who alone bore the weight of a dream that wasn't just hers. Before we continue this story,
Tell me something. Have you ever done something out of love and been misunderstood for it? Then subscribe to this channel, because in this space, we tell stories of those who loved, sacrificed, and were judged for doing the right thing. 2 days later, a black car pulled up in front of the cafe. Sofia watched through the window, wiping her hands on her apron. The familiar sound of the horn made her heart clench. It was Carlos, her older brother, the same one who had left everything to work in the big city. He got out of the car in an expensive suit and a smile that mixed affection and judgment. "Still open?" he asked, as if the cafe were a stubborn mistake. Sofia hugged him, but the gesture was not reciprocated. Carlos looked around, noticing the details: the worn floor, the faded sign, the strong smell of burnt coffee. "You still insist on this," he said, without disguising his disdain. Sofia took a deep breath. "It's Mom's dream." He chuckled softly. "A dream that turned into a debt, from what I can see." Those words pierced the air like needles. Upon hearing her son's voice, Donna Elena limped into the room. Her eyes lit up, and she hugged him tightly. "My boy!" she exclaimed, overcome with emotion. Carlos smiled, but his gaze shifted quickly to Sofia. It was as if her presence bothered him, as if he wanted to gauge how much she had failed to maintain the household. Sofia remained silent. She already knew that look. During lunch, Carlos started asking questions. How many employees were left? How much did the cafe make per month? How were the accounts? Sofia tried to explain that the pandemic and her mother's illness had made everything difficult, but he interrupted. "You should have closed this place a long time ago." Donna Elena reprimanded him with a look, but the unease had already been established. In the afternoon, Carlos asked to see the financial records. "I want to understand what happened to Mom's money," he said seriously. Sofia hesitated, but handed over the notebooks. He glanced at them quickly and frowned. "These numbers don't make sense. The profit is practically zero." Sofia replied, "Because all the money goes to rent, medicine, and old debts." He shook his head in disbelief. The atmosphere soured completely when Carlos suggested selling the business. Sofia turned pale. "Do you want to ruin Mom's dream?" she asked, offended. "No, I want to save what's left," he retorted. The mother, quiet, just watched. The tension between the two was old, like a wound that never healed and started bleeding again.
That night, Sofia overheard Carlos talking on the phone in the hallway. "I don't know how she managed to ruin such a simple deal so badly," he said, not realizing she was listening. The words hit him like a blade. Sofia locked herself in her room and wept silently, her heart heavy with shame and anger. The next day, the cafe had a different atmosphere. Carlos sat at the counter with his laptop open, analyzing the spreadsheets like an auditor. Each click felt like a judgment. Sofia served the coffee with trembling hands, trying not to react. He typed, murmuring, "Something's wrong here." As night fell, he stood up, facing his sister. "Sofia," he said gravely, "Mom's money is gone." Sofia froze at the accusation. The words, "Mom's money disappeared," seemed to echo throughout the cafe as if the walls had heard them. Carlos crossed his arms, looking at her like an investigator facing a suspect. "Can you explain to me where the profits from all these years have gone?" he asked coldly. Sofia tried to answer, but her throat tightened. "Carlos, I never paid myself a cent. Everything that came in went to keep the cafe afloat." He laughed humorlessly. "Convenient, don't you think? No profit, no accounting, but the store remains open." Sofia felt her face flush. I'm not a thief, Carlos." The silence that followed was more painful than the scream. Doña Helena, who was watching from the living room, called her son in a weak tone, asking him to calm down, but he didn't stop. "You had access to all her money, and now, out of nowhere, there's nothing." Sofia took a deep breath, trying not to cry. "The money was spent on medicine, bills, and repairs. Everything is recorded." Carlos picked up the notebooks and impatiently flipped through them. "This is a mess. You used to write it down on paper? In 2025? She looked away. "I did what I could." His contempt was sharper than any direct accusation. That evening dinner was silent. Doña Helena tried to disguise her discomfort by asking about her son's work. Carlos talked about meetings, promotions, and goals. Sofia barely touched her food. Every word about corporate success seemed to mock the simplicity of her life. "You should have studied business administration, Sofia. Maybe the coffee business would have worked out." When dinner was over, she silently cleared away the dishes. Carlos went upstairs to the guest room, while Doña Helena remained thoughtful in the living room. "My daughter, he's just worried," she said sweetly. Sofia forced a smile. "I know, Mom." But inside, she felt something break. Worry doesn't humiliate. What he was doing was judgment disguised as concern. The next morning, Carlos showed up early, wearing a dress shirt and with an air of superiority. "I'm going to review the bank statements. I want to understand where the money went." Sofia didn't object, but her heart raced. Not out of guilt, but out of fear of what he would find. The personal loans she had taken out, the transfers that covered her mother's expenses, the installments for the most expensive medicine, all paid for out of her own pocket.
Luciana, her friend and loyal employee, sensed the tension. "He's treating you like a criminal, Sofia." She simply shook her head. "Let it be. One day he'll understand." But inside, Sofia doubted it. Carlos had always lived in a world where effort is measured by profit, and she in one where love is measured by sacrifice. That night, she reviewed the records again. She tried to organize the accounts in order, but the numbers were confusing, scattered across old notes. Still, she started a new spreadsheet. For the first time, she added up everything she had paid and done for coffee. The final amount made her gasp. It was a fortune. Sofia looked at the ceiling and murmured, 10 years. 10 years without a salary." Anger and pride mingled. For the first time, she didn't just want to prove her innocence, she wanted to be recognized. The next day dawned heavy, the air thick as before a storm. Carlos spent the morning in the makeshift office in the living room, typing furiously. Donna Elena watched, apprehensive. When Sofia brought coffee, he didn't even thank her. At 3 in the afternoon, he called her back. "I've finished reviewing everything." His voice was cold, calculated. "And?" she asked. He closed the laptop. "You robbed us." The sentence landed like a thunderclap. Donna Elena dropped her cup, the coffee spilling onto the floor. Sofia stood motionless, her heart racing. "Are you crazy?" she asked, trembling. "There's no way to justify such a huge difference in the numbers," Carlos insisted. "Mom's bank account is almost empty, and the café survives without profit. There's only one explanation." Sofia stood up, her eyes brimming with tears. "You don't understand anything that happened here." "Then explain it to me. Show me where the money is." Sofia took a deep breath, trying to contain her despair. The money became electricity, gas, medicine, rent. It became food on your table when you came on vacation and said you didn't have time to help. Carlos's face hardened. "You don't try to twist things around." His voice echoed through the house, hurting more than any words. Donna Elena tried to intervene. "That's enough, my children, please." But Carlos was already consumed by rage. "You ruined everything, Sofia. The money, Mom's name, the coffee." She cried. "I ruined it. I stayed. I cleaned, cooked,
took care of her when you didn't even care to know if she was alive." The words came out between sobs, raw, honest. The silence that followed was brutal. The mother wept, the brother stared at her, and Sofia trembled. Finally, Carlos grabbed his coat and said, "I'm going to find out what you did, Sofia, even if I have to drag you out of here." The door slammed shut, and the echo of the impact seemed to erase the air from the café.
Sofia fell to her knees, hugging her soiled apron. Doña Helena tried to approach, but her daughter was crying uncontrollably. "Mom, I didn't steal!" The mother weakly stroked her hair, murmuring, "I know, my love, but he doesn't know yet." Later, as night fell, Sofia turned on the office light and looked at the spreadsheets. The tears dried, giving way to a cold determination. "Want to see numbers? Then I'll show you the value of 10 years. As the wind rattled the windows, she began to type. One entry at a time, one memory per line. Every expense, every loan, every hour of sleep lost. The document that would change everything was born there, an accounting of love transformed into debt. And so, in the silence of the early morning, Sofia realized what was at stake was no longer money, it was respect. The clock struck 2 in the morning, and the sound of the keyboard broke the silence of the house. Sofia reviewed each note, each receipt, each forgotten slip in the drawers. Her hands ached, her eyes burned, but she didn't stop. With each line filled in on the spreadsheet, she relived a piece of her own history. The total increased like a cruel mirror of wasted time. She added up the expenses that were never reimbursed, the purchases made with her personal credit card, and the months when she didn't even have money for herself. Each filled cell was a bitter memory. $1,200, loan to repair the coffee machine. $500, mom's medicine. $3,000, roof repair. The final number, when it appeared on the screen, made her hands tremble. 10 years of life translated into figures. Exhaustion gave way to anger. "If he wants proof, he'll get it," she murmured. On the table, a pile of papers grew like a monument to injustice. She didn't want to destroy her brother. She only wanted to be seen. But wounded pride pushed her to a new, colder limit. "They owe me," she whispered to the void. In the morning, Luciana found Sofia asleep on the table, surrounded by papers and cold coffee. "My God, what happened here?" she asked, startled. Sofia lifted her head, her eyes red. "I'm doing what he asked, showing where the money went." Luciana flipped through the papers and her eyes widened. "You even included the days you took care of your mother?" Sofia nodded. "That's work, too." The two laughed softly, but it was a tired laugh. Luciana offered to help organize the documents, and together they created colorful tabs. Debts paid, medications, personal loans, salary not received. In the end, the file had more than 200 pages. She saved it on the computer with a simple name, Historical Debt. In the afternoon, Carlos appeared at the café, cold and distant. "Still here?" he said sarcastically. Sofia replied firmly, "I'm organizing the accounts as you asked." He raised an eyebrow. "Ah, so you're finally going to admit that you were wrong?" She looked him in the eyes. "No, I'll show you who really paid for everything." Carlos laughed, disbelieving.
Donna Elena watched from the window, her face downcast. She knew something was breaking between her children, something perhaps irreparable. When Sofia went upstairs to rest, her mother called her. "Daughter, sometimes, even when we're right, we lose if we don't have peace." Sofia kissed her forehead and replied, "Mother, today I need to lose the silence." That night, it rained heavily. The raindrops beat against the window panes like bitter applause. Sofia looked at the computer screen flashing in the dark. Historical debt completed. It was more than a file. It was a scream. Before going to sleep, he sent the document to Carlos's email. "So you understand what it's like to work 10 years for free," he wrote, and he clicked send. The sound of "sent successfully" was the last he heard before turning off the light, and perhaps the first step in changing everything. Carlos spent the morning locked in his room, reading the file. With each page, his expression changed. First disbelief, then irritation, and finally silence. He saw the receipts for personal transfers, the bank statements, the handwritten notes with dates, amounts, and detailed descriptions. Everything was there. Every penny, every effort. Downstairs, Sofia prepared coffee in silence, as she did every day. The strong smell filled the room, and she thought about how many times that aroma had sustained her when she wanted to give up. Luciana arrived early, noticing the tense atmosphere. "Has he seen it yet?" Sofia simply nodded. "He's digesting it." Hours later, Carlos descended the stairs slowly. His gaze was heavy, but pride still guided him. "You did all this on your own?" he asked, as if searching for a mistake. "Yes," Sofia replied, "because no one else would." He clenched his fists. "You should have asked me for help." She laughed humorlessly. "I did. You said you were busy." Donna Elena entered the room leaning on her cane. "That's enough, my children. You're hurting yourselves." Sofia approached and held her mother's hand. "I just want him to see, Mom. I'm not a thief." Carlos looked away. "I didn't call you a thief." "Yes, you did. And you shouted it in front of her." The mother's silence confirmed the truth. Carlos sat on the sofa and ran his hands over his face. "I just thought it was strange. It didn't make sense." Sofia interrupted. "What doesn't make sense is thinking that just because I stayed here, I didn't work. I gave my life for this cafe." The words came out laden with contained pain. Donna Elena began to cry. "You both inherited the same dream," said the mother, her voice trembling. "But only one of you had the courage to uphold it." Carlos stood up irritated. "That's unfair. I did my part too." Sofia replied firmly, "You left." The echo of that phrase filled the space like a sentence.
Later, Carlos went out to get some fresh air. Sofia stayed alone with her mother, who gave her the medicine. "He'll never understand, will he, Mom?" she asked softly. Donna Elena stroked her hair. "Maybe someday, but you don't need his approval to know who you are." While her mother slept, Sofia stood at the counter, watching the cafe sign. The wind rustled the curtains, and the smell of fresh coffee seemed to mingle with old memories of her and her mother laughing, serving customers, believing in the impossible. At that moment, Sofia decided she wouldn't let Carlos destroy what was left. The cafe was her life, and she would fight for it, even if it meant facing her own blood. The cafe was silent at dawn, but outside, a murmur was already spreading. Small groups of customers whispered at the counter, exchanging curious glances. "They say she embezzled money from her own mother," a woman whispered. Sofia heard, pretending not to. The words cut like glass. The town's judgment was more cruel than any direct accusation. Luciana tried to quell the comments. "You don't know anything," she replied firmly. But the rumors grew like wildfire. It only took one neighbor hearing a distorted version of the fight between the siblings for the story to become popular gossip. Sofia, once respected, was now seen as someone who lived off her mother's money. In the afternoon, business plummeted. Regular customers walked right past, avoiding greeting her. The doorbell hardly rang anymore. Sofia served coffee at empty tables, feeling the weight of each unoccupied chair. "Silence sells faster than cold coffee," she murmured bitterly. Luciana tried to cheer her up. "People forget quickly." Sofia sighed. Not always. They only forget when they find someone else to blame. Deep down, she knew her brother still harbored suspicions. Carlos had never denied anything, and his silence was the confirmation the town needed. That night, when she closed the till, the amount barely covered the day's expenses. 3 coffees and a cake. That's what's left after 10 years, she said, her voice breaking. Her mother watched sadly from the window. Don't pay attention to what they say, my daughter. Those who know you know the truth. Sofia smiled weakly. The problem, Mom, is that whoever speaks the loudest is the one who lies best. On Sunday, she went to Mass with Donna Elena. She felt their eyes meet hers, silently judging. The priest spoke about forgiveness, and Sofia swallowed hard. Forgiveness is a luxury when injustice still stings. They left in silence, each step a weight. On Monday, a supplier called saying they would suspend deliveries until the problems are resolved. Sofia understood the message. Reputation is also credit. She hung up the phone and took a deep breath. So, this is how it all ends. Not because of a mistake, but because of a rumor.
Luciana found her crying in the kitchen. You need to defend yourself, Sofia. She looked at the computer, where the historical debt file was still saved. I will defend myself, Lou, but not with words, with evidence. That night, she wrote a letter of despair that she would never send. At the end, she wrote a sentence that echoed within her. The worst prison is that of those who have to prove their honesty. While Sofia struggled to keep the cafe open, Carlos hatched another plan. Installed in his father's old office, he analyzed contracts and purchase proposals. Selling now could still yield something, he said on the phone. The buyer, a local investor interested in transforming the cafe into a modern franchise. For Carlos, it was a logical business deal. For Sofia, it would be the death of the legacy. Donna Helena overheard part of the conversation and tried to intervene. You can sell the coffee, Carlos. It was your mother's dream. He replied coldly. It was, Mother, but now it's a burden. The words stung like a dagger. She tried to argue, but a cough silenced her. Carlos helped her sit down, unaware of how much his decisions hurt her. In the afternoon, he went to the cafe with the air of someone who came to help. We need to talk, he said, pulling up a chair. Sofia crossed her arms. About what? He placed the papers on the table. The cafe can be sold for a good price. That way we can settle the debts and close this chapter. She laughed, incredulous. You want to resolve this by erasing our mother's history? It's not about history. It's about survival. You're sinking alone. I'm trying to save what little is left. Sofia stared at him, her gaze fixed. You want to save your ego, Carlos, not the coffee. The tension between them grew. You always think you're the victim, and you always think you're the hero. Donna Helena joined the conversation, leaning on her cane. Neither of them is a villain. They're just hurt. But Carlos didn't back down. Hurt? I'm trying to fix what she destroyed. Sofia raised her voice. Destroyed what? The dream you abandoned? The bills you never paid? The mother's gaze pleaded for peace, but the chasm between them grew. Later, Carlos met with the investor in the parking lot. She'll resist, the man warned. Carlos replied firmly, she won't have a choice. That phrase sounded crueler than he intended, but it was too late. The decision had been made. That night, Sofia saw her brother leave the house and discreetly followed him to his office. Through the window, she saw him handing papers to a stranger. Sales contract, Café Dulce Esperanza. Her air left her lungs. She returned home trembling. In the early morning, she opened her email and typed to Luciana. He's going to sell the coffee without consulting me.
Tears streamed down her face, but her fingers continued typing. I won't let him, even if it's the last thing I do.
As the clock ticked, Sofia looked at her mother's portrait on the counter. "I promised I'd never let this place die, Mom," she whispered, "and I won't break that promise, even if I have to face my own blood." The sound of the wind blew through the windows, and for the first time in months, Sofia didn't cry. There was something new in her eyes, a dangerous calm, the calm of someone ready to fight. Sofia spent the morning in silence, feeling her stomach churn. The café was empty, the air heavy with worry. Donna Helena watched her daughter from afar, noticing her distant gaze and restless hands. "What's wrong, my daughter?" she asked in a weak voice. Sofia took a deep breath and replied, "I think it's time you knew everything." She picked up the folder of papers from the counter and sat down next to her mother. Calmly, she began to show the spreadsheets. Each sheet represented a year of struggle, expenses, loans, payments. "See here, Mom, this was the month I fixed the oven. Here, when I paid the rent by myself. And here," her voice broke, "when I bought your medicine and said it was a gift." Donna Elena looked, her eyes welling up with tears. "My God, Sofia." Sofia tried to smile. "I didn't want you to worry, but Carlos thinks I stole." Her mother held her trembling hand. "He doesn't understand what it means to stay. He only knows how to leave." The words came softly but firmly. Sofia cried. "I just wanted him to trust me, Mother." Donna Elena caressed her face. "Those who know sacrifice don't need to prove their honesty." But the tender moments soon gave way to pain. The mother coughed heavily, almost breathless. Sofia ran to get the inhaler. "Calm down, Mom. Breathe." Fear mingled with tears. "You shouldn't stress about this, daughter," she said between sighs. "Promise you won't let hatred take over." Sofia nodded, but deep down she knew that hatred had already been sown. When Carlos returned, he found his mother lying down and his sister beside her. "What happened here?" he asked. "Nothing that hasn't happened before," Sofia replied curtly. He noticed the folder on the table and frowned. "Did you show it to her?" Sofia replied, "I did. She has the right to know the truth." Carlos crossed his arms, "Or your version of it." The silence became piercing. Donna Elena opened her eyes, weak but firm. "Carlos, I saw everything. She didn't steal. She kept this alive." The words were like a slap. Carlos looked away, unable to face his mother. "You're being deceived, Mom. She's misleading you." His voice trembled between anger and fear. Sofia stood up slowly. "I don't need to deceive anyone. I have proof. You're proud." Carlos approached, his face red. "You always play the victim," Sofia replied, "and you've always been the son who never looked back." The mother began to cry.
"Stop, please," she cried, through tears. They both stepped back, the silence weighing heavily on the room. Carlos left, slamming the door. Donna Elena looked at her daughter and whispered, "One day he will understand, but perhaps too late." That night, Sofia sat beside her mother's bed, holding her hand. The sound of her fragile breathing was a painful reminder that not every struggle is worth the same amount of time. Outside, the wind blew, and Sofia thought about everything she still had to face, and how love sometimes hurts more than absence. The next day, Luciana showed up early, her face tense. "Sofia, we need to talk." She held up her cell phone, showing a message. It was a screenshot sent by an acquaintance from the city hall. Carlos had scheduled a meeting to sell the coffee. The contract was already in progress. "He's selling the business, Sofia, without you knowing." Sofia felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. "No, he wouldn't be capable.
Her voice faltered before she could finish the sentence. Luciana squeezed her shoulder. I saw the papers. He's closing the deal tomorrow. The air grew heavy. Her heart raced. For a few seconds, time stood still. And then came the fury. So that's it! He wants to erase everything! Without thinking, she went upstairs and knocked on her brother's bedroom door. Carlos opened it, surprised. What's it now? Sofia held up her cell phone in front of him. What's this? He glanced at it and replied coldly, Business. Business? You're selling Mom's coffee behind my back. Carlos maintained his composure. I am saving what I can still save. You're selling our story, Carlos. What's left of her life. He took a deep breath. Mom won't be around forever, Sofia. And when she's gone, this will be a burden. I'm dealing with this before it gets worse. She shouted, You don't have that right. The tension was unbearable. Both their eyes burned, filled with tears and anger. Hearing the shouts, Donna Elena appeared on the stairs, leaning on her cane. What's happening? She asked, breathless. Sofia turned around, her face in tears. He wants to sell the coffee, Mom, without telling me. Carlos tried to explain, I'm just thinking about the future. His mother, however, replied with unexpected firmness. The future isn't built by erasing the past. Sofia collapsed onto the sofa, exhausted. I've been here, Mom, all these years, and now he wants to take even that away from me. Carlos defended himself. You want to bury yourself with this place. The mother looked at them both, disappointed. You're destroying what I loved most, seeing my children together. Tears streamed down his aged face, and for the first time, Carlos lowered his head. But the truce was short-lived. When Sofia went to the office, she found a folder on the desk. Inside were the sales contracts already signed by Carlos, with space reserved for her signature. In the corner, a note in his handwriting. If you don't sign, the lawyer will proceed with legal action. Anger gave way to disbelief.
Sofia tore up the draft, throwing the papers on the floor. You want war, Carlos? Then you'll get it. Her eyes burned, but her voice was firm. Luciana, who was entering at that moment, saw the scene and understood everything. He betrayed you. Sofia looked at her mother's portrait on the wall. No, he betrayed what she believed in most. Later, when the house was quiet, Sofia reopened the historical debt file. She added a new tab, attempted sale, and she wrote a single sentence at the top. The price of love is forgetfulness, but I will never forget. That night, she decided she wouldn't let the coffee be sold, even if it meant turning her grief into a public battle. The cafe was closed that day. The chairs were stacked, the curtains drawn. Absolute silence. Sofia paced back and forth with a folder in her hands, the same one that contained everything, the receipts, the records, the story written in numbers and tears. Today, I won't run away anymore, she murmured, glancing at her watch. In an hour, Carlos and his mother would arrive. Luciana tried to convince her to wait. Sofia, he'll deny everything. You're getting ready to get hurt. But Sofia was determined. I don't want to hurt you, Lou. I want to show you. That's all. Show you. Her eyes had a firmness that not even fear could shake her. She had spent a decade being invisible. Now it would be impossible to ignore her. Carlos arrived first, tense, his expression serious. What's this? He asked, seeing the papers on the table. The meeting you should have scheduled with me before trying to sell the coffee, Sofia replied calmly. He crossed his arms. There's no point in making a scene. Sofia opened the folder and began. Then see for yourself. 10 years, one by one. With each page she turned, Carlos lost a little of his superiority. There were receipts, bank statements, proof of transfers from her personal card to pay for coffee shop bills. These purchases were with my money, Carlos, not Mom's. He leafed through them disdainfully. You want me to believe that? I don't. I want you to read it. Donna Elena entered slowly, calling the two of them over. May I sit down? Sofia pulled up a chair and took her mother's hand. "I want you to hear everything." Carlos hesitated, but remained standing. Sofia took a deep breath and continued. "For 10 years, I worked here, without a salary, without help. When the coffee shop almost closed, I used what little I had. And do you know what I got? An accusation." Carlos clenched his jaw. "You could have told me. I tried, but you never had time to listen." The mother looked back and forth between the two, silent tears streaming down her face. "And the transfers?" Carlos asked, trying to remain composed. Sofia pointed to the paper. "That one was for the hospital. Do you remember her admission? I paid for it." His voice wavered. And the reforms. Me too." Carlos was silent for a few seconds, looking at the papers. The truth was there, indisputable. "I only wanted to help," he murmured. Sofia replied, "Helping isn't destroying, Carlos, it's adding, and you only subtracted."
Donna Elena, her voice weak, said, "My son, she never stole from us. She saved us." The words seemed to break something inside him. Carlos dropped the papers and stepped away, his face tense, his hands trembling. I didn't know." Sofia took a deep breath and said what she had kept to herself for years. "No, Carlos, you didn't want to know." The silence that followed was heavy, but different, a silence born from the impact of the truth. Carlos stood still, his gaze lost on the papers scattered across the table. For the first time, he seemed small, disarmed. The pride that had always guided him now weighed like a stone on his chest. I didn't mean to hurt you, Sofia. I just thought I was doing the right thing." Sofia looked at him, weary. "You always thought that, even when you were stepping on others." Donna Elena watched the two of them, her eyes welling with tears. "You spent so much time fighting, and time is the only thing that doesn't come back." Sofia approached her mother, holding her hand. "I tried, Mom. I swear I tried to keep everything together." She nodded weakly, but with a slight smile. "I know, my daughter. I always knew." Carlos took a deep breath, trying to contain his shame. "You should have told me." Sofia replied, "I did tell you, but you don't listen to anyone who doesn't speak your language, the language of profit." He looked away, unable to meet her gaze. "I thought I was protecting the family." "No, Carlos, you were protecting your name." The silence was broken by the mother, who coughed and asked for water. Sofia ran to help her, while Carlos, motionless, watched. He saw what he had never seen before, his sister caring with tenderness, patience, and strength. That hurt more than any document. It was there, in that simple gesture, that he finally understood what she had carried for years. "You never rested, did you?" Sofia shook her head. "There was never time. There was always something to pay for, to fix, to save." Carlos swallowed hard. "And I thought you were just wasting your time." The words sounded heavy, almost a confession. Luciana arrived at that moment, carrying a tray of tea. The atmosphere was tense, but she tried to break the ice. "You should have seen what she did to keep this place afloat. It was a miracle the café didn't close." Carlos looked at Sofia, his eyes welling with tears. "You should have let me know." Sofia replied calmly, "I did. You just never asked." Donna Elena held their hands, joining them tightly. "Promise you'll take care of each other when I'm no longer here." Her voice trembled, and Sofia cried. Carlos, with his eyes downcast, simply nodded.
I promise, Mother.
Later, when she was asleep, Carlos approached his sister. I don't know if an apology is enough. Sofia looked at him. It isn't, but it's a start. He took a deep breath and said, I'll fix what I did. Then start by staying, she replied, for the first time. Carlos looked around, seeing the cafe with new eyes, not as a business, but as a piece of history. Are you reopening tomorrow? Yes, Sofia replied, with or without help. He smiled, a shy, almost childlike smile. This time, it will happen. When she turned off the lights that night, she felt something new in the air. It wasn't complete forgiveness, nor total peace, but it was the beginning of a healing process that took 10 years to develop. Dawn arrived gently, the smell of fresh coffee filling the house. Sofia prepared breakfast in silence, while Donna Elena still slept in the bedroom. Carlos helped for the first time, cutting the bread with trembling, clumsy hands. I never thought it would be so hard to wake up early for this, he joked, trying to lighten the mood. Sofia smiled slightly. Now you understand what it's like to make a living from this. The day seemed calm, but there was something different in the air, a stillness laden with foreboding. In the afternoon, Donna Elena called Sofia to her bedside. Daughter, there's something I need to tell you. Her voice was weak, but her eyes shone with a rare lucidity. Sofia sat up, curious and fearful. What is it, Mother? The mother held out a yellowed envelope with delicate, old-fashioned handwriting. I wrote this letter a few months ago, when I realized my body was getting tired. Sofia stood still. Mom, don't talk like that. Donna Elena smiled. I'm not leaving now. I just want to make sure that what needs to be said is said. Sofia held the letter, too afraid to open it. Read it, my daughter. She took a deep breath and began to read. The first line spoke of love and gratitude, but as she went on, tears fell. You were the invisible foundation of this house, the strength that held together what everyone thought was lost. When they say you didn't do enough, remember, you were more than any salary could pay for. Sofia's hands were trembling. If one day your brother accuses you, don't hold a grudge. He inherited my dream, but you inherited my soul. Those words pierced her heart. Carlos, who had heard them from the hallway, entered with tears in his eyes. Mom, She interrupted him with a gentle gesture. Now you understand, my son? He nodded, crying. I understand, and I'm ashamed for taking so long. Donna Elena smiled tenderly. Shame is the first step to forgiveness. She held both their hands and whispered, You still have time to fix everything. The coffee isn't the legacy. Love is. Hours later, while her mother slept soundly, Sofia placed the letter in a glass frame, setting it on the cafe counter. It was more than just a piece of paper. It was a blessing.
That night, she and Carlos sat side by side in the dark. She always knew everything, he said. Sofia smiled, looking at the sky through the window. Mothers always know. They just wait for the right time to let us understand. The silence between the two was no longer one of resentment, but of healing. Outside, the wind seemed to carry away the weight of the years, and inside the house, for the first time, there was peace. 2 months had passed since Doña Elena's death. Mourning still lingered in every corner of the café, but now mixed with the scent of rebirth. Sofia and Carlos decided to reopen Doce Esperanza, renovated and revamped, maintaining their mother's roots in every detail. At the entrance, a new plaque bore a phrase from her letter, Love is the true gain. The city, curious, began to reappear. Little by little, the old customers returned, first out of curiosity, then out of nostalgia. Sofia served the coffees with a light smile, a departure from her former weariness. Luciana helped at the counter, while Carlos took care of the finances, this time with humility and gratitude. One morning, a lady came in, visibly emotional. "Mrs. Elena used to make the best cheese bread in the world," she said. Sofia replied with a smile. "Now it's her daughter's turn, but with the same recipe." The two laughed, and the café was filled with the warmth of human connection that had been lacking for so long. On the main wall, Sofia hung an old photo. Her mother, and Carlos on the first day of the café. Below he wrote, "Nothing is lost when it's done with love." Many customers stopped to read and sighed with emotion. The place, once marked by accusations and ruin, was now becoming a symbol of a new beginning. Carlos watched his sister with silent admiration. "You know, I finally understand what you meant about value." Sofia replied, "Money runs out. What remains is what we build within others." He nodded. "And you built all of that without anyone seeing." She smiled. "But now I want to be seen." Luciana appeared with the first positive balance sheet since reopening. "We're making a profit," she shouted excitedly. Sofia laughed, surprised. "A real profit?" Carlos joked, "this time without having to sell your heart." Everyone laughed together, and for the first time the sound of joy filled Doce Esperanza once more. Late in the afternoon, Sofia lit a candle in front of her mother's letter. "Look, Mom, we did it." Tears fell, but now they were tears of gratitude. The café was full, the smell of fresh bread mingled with the scent of new flowers. The dream reborn, not out of ambition, but out of love. Before closing, Carlos placed his hand on his sister's shoulder. "I'll pay you what I owe you." She looked confused. "What do you mean?" He smiled. 10 years of back wages, with interest for regret." Sofia laughed and shook her head. "You don't need to." "Yes, I do. To sleep peacefully."
And so, at the end of that day, the two of them stood looking at the lit sign, "Sweet Hope," reflected in the shop window. It wasn't just the name of a cafe, it was the name of their story. Time passed, the cafe thrived, and Doce Esperanza had once again become the heart of the city. Sofia, now more serene, managed everything wisely. The mornings were full of life, laughter, the smell of fresh coffee, people coming and going with stories to tell. Each customer seemed to take away a piece of the love she had once feared losing. Carlos, for his part, traveled for work, but always returned on weekends. He had found a new balance, not the balance of the spreadsheet, but the balance of conscience. "I never thought I'd feel at home in a cafe," he would say, laughing. Sofia would reply, "Welcome to the part of life that money can't buy." The two no longer needed excuses. The silence between them was now one of peace. One morning, Sofia found an envelope on the counter, with her handwritten name on it. Her heart raced. The postmark bore Carlos's company address. She opened it carefully. Inside, there was a letter and a check. The amount? Exactly. 10 years of unpaid wages. But what made her cry wasn't the numbers. It was the message. Sofia, this check is not payment. It's a request for forgiveness. Because I didn't see what you were doing, because I didn't hear when you were speaking. Money buys things, but time buys regret. And I wasted too much time. With love and gratitude, Carlos. Tears streamed down her face silently. She looked at the check and with a sweet smile, placed it inside the frame where her mother's letter had been. Now, the two most important words in her life were side by side. Thanks and forgiveness. Luciana appeared soon after, curious. "What's this, Sofia?" She pointed to the frame. a symbolic receipt. For what? Asked her friend. Sofia smiled. For it being worth it. A soft laugh echoed through the café, and Luciana hugged her. You won, my friend, Sofia replied softly. No, we just fixed what love shouldn't have broken. In the afternoon, the sun illuminated the new sign. A family entered asking if this was the same café as the old Dona Elena's. Sofia replied, Yes, it is, but now it's her daughter's café. The father smiled. Then it must be even better. She laughed, touched, and served the first coffee of the new batch.
As the steam rose, Sofia looked at the letter and the check reflected in the glass. She thought about everything she had lost, everything she had gained, and everything she had learned. Life, after all, is made of this: debts paid with love, and silences that finally find a voice. Before closing the café that night, she turned off the lights and stood alone for a moment. "Mom, he paid," she whispered with a slight smile. "But what I received was so much more than money." Outside, the sign gleamed in the darkness. Sweet Hope. And for the first time in many years, the name made sense again. Did this story touch you? Then sign up now, because here every story is a mirror of real life, of families who hurt each other, who get lost, but in the end they find each other again. Click on Sign Up. Come and experience it with us, because sometimes love isn't spoken, it's proven.